Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Age Gap Love Story. We are Carrie and Alan, a married couple with a 32-and-a-half-year age difference. And we started this podcast and YouTube channel to offer information, support, and community to help make your age gap relationship successful. And today we are talking about staying healthy during the coronavirus and the flu season. And we wanted to share some of our immune boosting tips and how you can stay strong during this challenging time. And I want to mention that we have a sponsor for today's video. It is Thrive Market. It's an online grocery store and a great place to buy healthy food items. And we have a special link that I will add to the show notes and the description. And the link will give you a free gift up to $22 value when you purchase a Thrive Market membership. And we have a Thrive Market membership, and we have been ordering a ton of stuff because we have not been shopping as much, and we're going to talk about that. And as usual, we are not offering medical advice. We're sharing our experience and what we've learned. We are also piggybacking on our last episode, episode 11, where we talked about the basic guidelines that we follow to stay healthy in general. So we hope that you listened to that episode, and then we thought today would be kind of a special episode devoted to this unique time period that we're living through. And if you're listening to this in the future, then we hope that this is still relevant, because, like during flu season and things like that. So we are living through historic times right now, and I think of course it requires us to be more careful. And we assume that if you're listening, either you are over 50 or you are in a relationship with somebody who's over 50, and of course that is kind of the break point. I think it's 50 or 55 when your risk level for either the coronavirus or a flu puts you at greater risk. And the CDC website, which I will link, that is the Centers for Disease Control of the United States, and talks about how each age group, and there's research that backs this up, but each age group, let's say 40 to 50, 50 to 60, and so on, has increased risk if you contract either a flu virus or COVID-19. And the greatest risk is for people who are over 85, and also for people with underlying health conditions. So we're going to talk about three main topics today. We're going to talk about lifestyle and prevention, changes that Alan and I have both made. We are going to talk about our supplements and nutrition, and then we're just going to talk about kind of how we've adapted and how we're managing like our mental health and stuff like that. So maybe we should jump in. I thought it might be interesting to talk about how we were kind of, we learned about COVID-19 and how first we thought, we'll go into it, but how each of us kind of responded and how I finally took it seriously, but go ahead and talk a little bit about that.
Hello, fans. Hope you're all well during these unusual times. To cover the point that Carrie was making, I believe it was in early March, as I began to read more about the virus internationally and incidents of infections in the U.S., I became, I wouldn't say alarmed, but definitely concerned. And my personality is one of being very compulsive with respect to organization and preparation. So immediately my thoughts, as I began to realize or believe that there was a possibility of a real threat with the virus, was that we needed to prepare for it. So that particular day we went to Costco, and Carrie, basically I had to drag her into this idea of preparing for a possible virus issue, kicking and screaming. When we were at Costco, I said, let's buy some additional sandy wipes, disinfecting wipes, Costco has a brand that's inexpensive and really does a good job.
Can I interrupt really fast and defend myself? Because you have to give some context. First of all, we were lied to by our government. We know that as a fact now. And secondly, we were told by the government that this was no worse than a flu virus. And I'm also coming from a point of view that we're always told how bad the flu always is. And we always take precautions during flu season, but usually stuff like this is made, like the media likes to put it in the headlines and make a big deal about it when it's not actually a big deal, or it's not like life-threatening. And so that is just kind of the general context. So I was just going off what I knew to be true, and I was listening to what we were hearing from the government, that it wasn't going to be a big deal. So can we just put that in context? And also for our listeners who live outside of the US, Costco is one of these big warehouse stores, and you buy things in bulk and it's usually at a discount price. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Go ahead.
Thank you, Carrie. So based on our points of views, which as you just heard were divergent, Carrie acceded to my compulsion to be prepared for whatever might be ahead of us, and we bought a number of extra basic supplies, as I mentioned, the disinfecting wipes, toilet paper, Kleenex. We bought some additional food items and a little greater quantity than we normally buy because we do have a supplementary freezer in our garage at home. So anyway, we did that, and as time went by, a very short time, as a matter of fact, after that shopping excursion, things did apparently get worse, and we started to stay home. We were able to, thanks to Carrie's efforts by shopping online, we were able to get a pretty fast delivery of some paper masks before they became almost impossible to get. We also had a supply of gloves because we have our cleaning lady use them, and then Carrie uses them when she worked on the kitty litter box, but I can't remember if we bought more that time or not, but Carrie did find some additional ones. In fact, although I made fun of her, now I apologize for doing that, because she found, although there was not a lot available, she found a box of 1,000 gloves online at a reasonable price. So we got those. We had the face masks. We had enough of the other supplies that I mentioned. And so we were set for a while. Also, the lady who would act as a cat sitter for us when we would travel, since that business kind of died, she immediately contacted all of her cat sitter customers and said that she was now doing grocery shopping for them. So we started to use her for grocery shopping, as we didn't want to go out. As Carrie mentioned, when you get over a certain age, and with certain conditions, you become much more vulnerable, not only to the virus, but also to the flu. But in any case, so we basically were in lockdown at home. We didn't go out except for walks around our neighborhood. We avoided contact with friends and neighbors except through FaceTime. When we went out to the market, which we did after a few weeks actually, and stopped using our pet sitter and some online delivery services, which we didn't really find to be either economic or precise. They'd buy the wrong things. And anyway, so we kind of got through the worst of it. And I'm 78, as you know, and I'm a former smoker, having smoked for a long time and quit in my 30s, late 30s. So Carrie realized that I basically had a target on my back for the virus. Now I'll let Carrie kind of pick up here.
Yes, so again, in early March of 2020, I think actually one day, so my sister was going to be visiting from the Washington State area where the pandemic started in the United States, or really kind of, I think that's where it was a hot spot, one of the first hot spots. And a few days before she was set to arrive, we got an email from our functional medicine physician who we talked about in our last episode. And he said he pretty much made it clear that this virus was something to be concerned about. And when I heard that from him, because I trust him very much and more than any other source of medical information, including the government, I was worried. I was, up until that point, I was like, oh, this is not even as bad as the flu, so why are we even freaking out? And as soon as our doctor put out this email to all his patients, I was really concerned. And I was also very concerned because my sister was going to be visiting, and of course, coming from that hotspot area and then being on an airplane, I was very concerned that she may bring the virus into our home. And so I had to call her. Alan and I talked about it and make that very uncomfortable, not pleasant conversation, asking her not to come, which is really unfortunate. And we were both very disappointed, but I felt 100% that it was the right decision. And of course, I mean, as the time went on and we realized how dangerous the virus really is and was, that was the right decision, as hard as it was. And of course, I'm sure like many people, that is like just the beginning of all the sacrifices we've all had to make. And I mean, a lot of people have even had much worse things happen, and I mean, it's continuing today. Now we're recording this, it is the middle of September 2020. It's been over 6 months now, and so other things have changed.
And 200,000 approximately people have died of the virus
In the United States.
So obviously it is a serious situation. One thing I neglected to mention earlier, at Carrie's suggestion, which is something I overlooked as we were going through adjusting our life to being more cautious with the virus in mind, we actually were going to 2 exercise classes, actually 3 a week, 2 for a Pilates class in our immediate area, and 1 for an overall aerobic and strength training class, also locally. All of which we enjoyed, but we had prepaid for a number of classes, and fortunately, thanks to the courtesy of the providers, we were able to get a refund on the unused sessions because we didn't know how long we'd be away. But we stopped going to those and then supplemented that with home exercise, as we mentioned previously.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We didn't really have any home gym equipment, so I went online, and it was really hard to find some hand weights, and I think we waited several weeks for those. We ended up getting hand weights. We have resistance bands, and we do have a TRX, which are, if you're not familiar with that, it's a kind of a body resistance program, although we don't use it as much as we should. I think because we only have one set, and so we can't do it together. And it's difficult because you have to put it onto a door frame, and our house really doesn't have a great setup for that. But we have, as I think Alan mentioned in the last episode, we started doing Jazzercise, which and we'd actually been going to an in-person Jazzercise program, and if you don't know Jazzercise, it's kind of like an aerobic dance program, and it's really fun, and we love it. And so now we're doing it online, and obviously they're not a sponsor of this program, but we want to share things that we think are useful. And also, I had kind of known this, but viruses, not only do they enter your body through your nose and your mouth, they can also enter through your eyes. And so I also got some clear, almost like wraparound sunglasses, and that's also part of our protective gear.
Right, they're clear glasses. I think they're used in environments where your eyes might be exposed to.
Like if you were mowing the lawn.
Right, and I think they're used for industrial purposes, but they're clear plastic, and they're made by 3M, but I'm sure there are a number of varieties. But as Carrie said, they are wraparound. And then a little bit later, we noticed when we would go shopping, when we cautiously went back out, that some of the people that were working in the markets were wearing these face shields. And Carrie did some research and found that they were actually even better than the glasses. And she bought some of those, a little package of 6, which are really inexpensive. And it's a clear plastic shield with an elastic band that goes around the top of your head. Now, some of our listeners, I know this is a very controversial subject, and we don't want to inflame anybody one way or the other as far as attitudes, but I can tell you what our approach is regarding masks. I know this, again, this is a hot topic which has become political, social, rather than medical, I suppose. But the way Carrie and I look at it is that we base what we try to do on science. We research from what we consider reliable sources, from our functional medicine doctor, and from our own common sense. And although some of you may not think that masks are a good precaution to primarily protect other people, but also yourself, that's fine. You do what you have to do, although your behavior does impact others. As far as your well-being, and in fact the well-being of others, I think back on similar circumstances when using seatbelts in cars. Received a big pushback from the public. It was uncomfortable, it was restraining, it's something I don't want to be told I have to do. But most people did find out that it reduced deaths. It allowed you to remain in control of the car under a number of circumstances during an accident, prevented you from injuring others. Smoking is another idea. A lot of people that were smokers, and I was one of them years ago, rebelled at the idea that you couldn't smoke here, being told all the time by friends, relatives, and the news media, health officials, that smoking was deadly. It impacted the health of others from secondhand smoke. And yet smoking in the United States, now proven to be unhealthy, has diminished greatly. So I think mask wearing is in that same category. It's for the good of others as well as yourself. Granted, it's uncomfortable. I know when I put a mask on, the last batch that we have, the elastic that goes over my ears is uncomfortable. But I try to stretch it out a bit before I put it on. Carrie and I find it makes our face hot. It does fog up the glasses that we wear when we use those. It is a pain, but it's something that you do to protect others and protect yourself. And again, it's up to you. It's a personal decision.
Yes, I like how you stated that. And I think the gloves are maybe a little overkill, but the gloves are a little bit nice just because I don't know, it just feels like we don't have to use hand sanitizer quite as much, although we still do. But we use the gloves really just when we go grocery shopping because we're touching so many things.
Right, and right after checkout, as soon as we get outside, we remove the gloves by peeling them back inside out so we don't touch the surface. I mean, when I think of gloves, it reminds me of on trips years ago when we would go to New York, you'd see these vendors on the street. I guess the city imposed a requirement that all food handlers, even for the vendors on the street, had to wear these gloves, disposable gloves. And you see these guys serving up the food, touching different things with their hands, and then the next person that would walk up would pay them, and they'd be touching the money or scratching their fanny or God knows what, and then they would be touching the food again with these gloves on. So that sort of burned into my mind. The gloves are like your hands. You don't want to touch something bad and then touch your face.
Yeah, so now that we're 6 months in, these are the precautions we're taking. As Alan mentioned, we are doing our own shopping now because also we started to feel quite isolated and we just needed to get out of the house. Now, we are fortunate we live in an area where there hasn't been huge outbreaks. We do keep an eye on the numbers from day to day, and so we are going shopping, but what we've done is now we try to go shopping less frequently, and so I stock up. So rather than maybe grocery shopping twice a week, we go once a week and I just buy double of what we need. And I have dropped the temperature on our refrigerator to try to keep the food fresher, the fresh food, the greens and the lettuces. So that's one thing that you can do, a little tip there. I would maybe, if you're in the US, your refrigerator is probably set to 38 degrees Fahrenheit or 37. You can really drop it to about 35, 36. You don't want to go too much lower or your food in your fridge will freeze. And then it's really unusable. If you freeze your lettuce, it's gonna turn soggy. So that's just a little tip there. Also, one tip that we've been doing for a long time is we bought some little alcohol swabs. They're really small. They're maybe one
inch square.
Yes, an inch square. And we wipe our phones anytime we go out. We wipe the outside where the buttons are. We wipe the face, and we have had no problems with it hurting the phone. It just seems to be a good idea because that is a surface where germs can live and viruses. So we're very, very careful about that. We've been doing that for several years.
When we were traveling before the virus hit, back Carrie had these larger wipes in travel packets. And as soon as we get to a hotel room, and again, this is long before the virus because Carrie had read and has taken classes actually in food safety and is very much aware of epidemiology. In fact, I believe a professor you had for one of your classes, her husband was an infectious disease physician. And when we became acquainted with him, we picked up some tips from him. But when we would hit a hotel or we were in the airplane, I mean, Carrie was like the busy bee with a wipe down. It was like, lift your arm, lift your feet, raise your eyebrows, and everything got a wipe down.
Yes, well, actually it's because I took a microbiology class during my studies, and we had to swab, we tested our own homes for germs and bacteria. And so we swabbed different places in our house, like including the kitchen sink, the kitchen faucet, I don't even remember, I think I tested my yoga mat, and then we cultured the samples, and you can see how much bacteria and virus was on your home surfaces, and it was so disgusting. And ever since then, I've been a germaphobe. So I think it's working to my advantage in this case. And then the last thing that we've done as far as prevention is, I don't know if this would be helpful or for you, but again, if you're living with someone or you are someone at high risk, because of Alan's age and because of his history of smoking, he is at high risk. And so I've just been really concerned about, what happens if he gets the virus. So I did buy one of those little, it's called an oximeter, and it is a finger tip measurement of your oxygen saturation level. It was not expensive, maybe $10 to $20. Fortunately, we have not had to use that, but we also have thermometers and some extra things on hand to try to manage any illness at home. And then I have a list of things that our doctor has said, like when you would need to go to the hospital. So that kind of is the extent of our precautions. Why don't we jump into some of the extra things as far as supplements and nutrition that we're doing?
Okay. Do you want to cover that since you're the nutritional expert?
Well, yes. And
actually, she's the expert on everything.
Haha. Yes, I am. So extra vitamin C, extra vitamin D. Vitamin D is something that you can have measured on a blood test, and you should 1 to 2 times a year. We take extra zinc. And then there's something that is fairly new to me. It is called a beta-glucan. And I think it's I should have done a little bit more research of what exactly it is, but it is something that can help boost your immune system.
Do you want to spell glucans?
Glucans. And I will link to an article about them because I had done some research on them in the past when we first started taking them. That's something extra that we do, and again, I will link to that. And I also have a blog post about boosting the immune system, so I can link to that as well. And then, of course, we just generally eat a healthy real foods diet. We talked about this in episode 11. We eat lots of fruits and veggies. We try to watch our sugar. We're not perfect, but we do our best. And then we're sleeping more. Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, but let's not forget fiber in our diet too. Fiber is our friend. Sleeping more. Well, Carrie and I are pretty much big sleepers anyway. We go to bed relatively early, usually a little before, well, let's say 8:30, 8:45 in the evening. Although Carrie gets up much earlier than I do, which around 5:30 or so.
That's why I'm yawning.
And I normally get up a little before 7, so I get a lot of sleep. But I've always required a lot of sleep.
And also, I think we talked about this last time, but the experts recommend 7 to 9 hours. But if you have to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, or you have periods of awakeness in the night, that does not go towards your 7 to 9 hours. You actually need to be asleep for 7 to 9 hours. So if you find that you toss and turn, so say for an hour during the night, and you need 9 hours of sleep, that means you need to be in bed for 10 hours. And I think that's the case with Alan.
Is awakenedness a worm?
Worm?
A word.
Awakenedness?
Let's look that up.
It is a word.
Okay.
We're not playing Scrabble here.
Piffle.
Okay, so then I think now we should move into section 3, which is kind of how we've adapted and managed our mental health and how we've managed the social isolation. You go first.
Thank you very much. Okay, we definitely, and I'm sure a number of people that have pets have experienced a strengthening of their bond with their pets, and those that don't have pets have gone out to get them, which I understand has become almost like a national wave of people getting new pets. But we have found that they have warmed even more to us.
Our 2 cats.
Yes, because as you know, cats are sometimes difficult from an affection standpoint, and ours were particularly so, I think, being part feral. But anyway, we've just strengthened our bond with them, and it's been very rewarding. They make us laugh, they give us lots of love, and they're just, fun to touch and hold and whatever. Also, we've been FaceTiming with friends and family, and where that isn't convenient for them, we've been calling more and staying in touch and finding out how they're doing, and many of them have an interest in how we're doing. So it's a case of filling a gap partially of the human contact, which I think we both miss, being out seeing people, talking to people, and enjoying that aspect of life.
I think even this podcast maybe is a result of the virus and wanting to connect more with people, wanting to share our story, and having more time to be creative. I think if we hadn't been in the virus, we may not have come up with the idea to start doing this. So maybe that's a positive thing.
Another thing, I actually made this change before the virus hit, and that is I used to record the news programs in the early afternoon, because many of them are based on Eastern time and we're in the Pacific time zone. And then I would watch them later in the afternoon or early evening while Carrie was getting dinner ready, the news from different sources. And I just found it to be overwhelming, so depressing, that I cut way back and started watching a much smaller amount of news, and even reduced it further as we were at home under lockdown during the pandemic. And to the extent that you can do that, I think it's just a healthier thing. As Carrie mentioned earlier, and I'm sure we're all aware, all news stations and news sources, irrespective of what your political beliefs are, generally are sensationalist to one degree or another. And they can make your emotions be like ping pong, swinging in one direction or the other, up, down. And I don't think any of us need that, especially during a stressful, time like this.
Yeah, and I just want to interrupt and say, for example, somebody who's close to me, I saw on Instagram, she kept posting how upset she was with different things happening in the news. And like it was really bringing her down, but yet she kept posting about it. And then she would just, it was almost like she was just digging herself deeper and deeper into a hole. And quite frankly, I had to mute her posts because it was bringing me down too. And I almost felt like telling her, you've got to stop. Like, you have to stop watching the news for a while and focus on more positive things because you're bringing everybody down, including yourself.
Yes. Another thing that we've done is balancing work with personal time, although now I'm pretty much retired. I do have things that keep me busy to a degree. I have to confess I do have some dead time, but I'm finding ways to fill it up. In fact, recently started writing a novel, more for my own entertainment and to keep my mind functioning by doing some research on different aspects to fill out the story. And Carrie has been more tempered in her work, although she still puts on a really long work day. But she finds a great deal of personal gratification and enjoyment in her work. Carrie started playing the violin, has been taking lessons and has intensified that a bit, and it certainly improved her skills with the violin during the virus, and she's taking online classes. In fact, from a lady in Chicago, and it's worked out really well.
Yeah, and there are just so many things that we can do to fill the time. I know it's challenging, especially if you are suffering from a job loss and worried about income and things like that. It's hard to just compartmentalize that and then try to do something fun when you're stressed. I mean, that's incredibly
Yes,
difficult.
and taking care of children and going through the homeschooling, I can't imagine how difficult that is for people.
Yeah.
But there's one positive thought that I think we should kind of cap off our